Hi, welcome to Dig Into China. I'm Dong Sheng. In the past few years, many people have felt that Chinese society seems like a powder keg, with everyone ready to explode at the slightest provocation. Recently, an incident involving a Manner coffee barista caught the public's attention. The barista had an emotional breakdown and clashed with a customer, making headlines. Manner Coffee exemplifies the demanding yet unrewarding work environment that are becoming common. They offer a meager salary of 5,000 yuan but expect one employee to manage nearly all tasks in the cafe, with even bathroom breaks strictly timed. Employees must also avoid receiving more than 3 customer complaints or they face termination. The barista, overwhelmed by the workload and incessant demands from customers, reaching a breaking point leading to the incident. Looking at the broader picture in China today, is there any company that isn't more competitive and demanding than before? Even leading Chinese companies like Huawei and contemporary Amperex Technology CATL, considered among the best and most profitable, are intensifying their exploitation of employees and suppliers. Recently, at the China Automotive Chongqing Forum, an individual revealed the true nature of Chinese electric vehicle companies. He claimed that these companies use intense internal competition to disrupt foreign markets, which has led to joint sanctions from Europe and the United States. This statement was made by the president of Bosch China, part of the globally renowned German company Bosch, the world's largest supplier of automotive parts. This statement detonated like a bomb in the media, igniting immediate controversy. The car companies, having been singled out, expressed strong discontent. Meanwhile, patriotic supporters deeply immersed in the Chinese dream steadfastly refused to admit that Chinese companies could be disruptors of order. However, I noticed that more people are awakening to and reflecting on China's culture of intense internal competition. In this video, we'll delve into why this phenomenon, often termed Chinese-style internal competition, causes widespread anguish and is perceived as a disruptor of societal order. The recent intensification in China is largely attributed to economic hardships, downturns, and reduced market demand. To stay competitive, businesses opt for price wars. In China, this often translates to exploiting employees and suppliers. Given the lax enforcement of the labor and contract laws, major corporations wield significant power, treating employees and suppliers as less influential, leading to exploitation of the weaker parties. However, if we examine it at its core, China's profoundly competitive culture stems primarily from 2 reasons. The first reason stems from the economic policies of the Communist Party, which prioritize external demand over internal demand, positioning China as the world's factory. Economies that prioritize internal demand typically avoid excessive exploitations of employees and suppliers, because reduced employee income means lower purchasing power, weakening internal demand even further. Henry Ford understood this principle when he provided his employees with holidays and wage increases, enabling them to afford the cars they produced, thereby significantly boosting internal demand. Since China began its reform and opening up, the Communist Party's strategy has been to position the country as the world's factory, utilizing China's low labor costs to dominate the overseas market and accumulate US dollars. Initially, they prioritized external demand and overlooked internal needs. By the time Xi Jinping assumed the leadership, China had amassed significant wealth from exports. Ideally, this should have prompted a shift away from reliance on external demand towards fostering internal consumption and raising incomes. However, much of this accumulated wealth was rapidly depleted. depleted, leaving unfinished goals without sufficient funds. Consequently, China continues its role as the world's factory, exploiting its workforce to maintain competitive advantages and earn foreign currency. This has contributed to the heightened intensity observed in recent years. The second reason is China's profoundly unjust distribution system. With the leader aiming to monopolize all wealth, the portion left for ordinary Chinese citizens naturally diminishes. I remember watching a film called The Platform, which portrays a vertical prison of 333 levels. A slab of food descends floor by floor. The inmates above eat heartily, leaving those below starving. As resource dwindle, desperation sets in, leading to extreme measures like cannibalism. A rebellion is imminent. In China, it often feels like ordinary citizens live in a hierarchical prison. At the top, the leader enjoys all the privileges, while scraps trickles down to those below. This distribution system categorizes people into different tiers, each receiving varying level of treatment. The lower one is in this hierarchy, the more exploitation they endure. It begs the question, where do you perceive yourself in this tiered structure? Let's continue discussing whether Chinese electric vehicles companies going global are exporting a culture of intense internal competition. Western media's concerns about sanctioning Chinese electric vehicles largely stem from fears that their domestic companies won't be able to compete with the aggressive practice of Chinese firms. This resistance reflects a rejection of the internal competition culture. Without the higher tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, China's cost advantages would significantly impact the competitiveness of the local companies. How can domestic firms match this? They can't adopt a practice like 996 voluntarily, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week voluntarily, especially with the robust labor unions in Europe and the United States. You can call it trade protectionism, but trade protectionism isn't always negative, especially when addressing suspicions of unfair competition between foreign and domestic companies. Chinese car manufacturers could benefit from emulating Toyota's approach in the US market. Toyota's success isn't solely reliant on aggressive price wars, but rather on offering competitively priced vehicles that consistently deliver trusted quality. Likewise, Korean car brands have been increased sales in the US by emphasizing additional features and enhanced interior quality alongside good reliability, prioritizing value for customers. If Chinese car manufacturers prioritize craftsmanship, invest in research and development, and enhance product quality rather than resorting to price dumping, they can undoubtedly cultivate loyal customer bases and establish distinct market segments for their products. This strategic focus on differentiation will enable them to build trust and long-term success in their targeted markets. In China, I've observed that the national environment doesn't support the survival of gradual, slow-developing enterprises. The country's venture capital primarily originates from government-linked sources, whether through specialized funds or bank loans, that prioritize swift returns and are generally reluctant to wait for extended periods. For instance, consider two companies. One that steals foreign technology to swiftly produce a replica product for rapid mass production and market entry, generating profits within 2 years of investment. The other insists on developing a superior product to surpass competitors before entering mass production with an investment cycle of around 5 years. Which company do you think Chinese investors would likely choose to fund? They would probably opt for the former due to its quicker return on investment despite its short-term focus. This preference over time shapes China's corporate landscape, favoring such companies driven by capital preferences. Behind these preferences often lies government influence, reflecting the societal value in China of achieving results and profitability, regardless of whether through self-developed or acquired technology. So, as they say, China's companies going global indeed export a culture of intense internal competition. This naturally invites rejection from civilized societies. If Chinese car manufacturers, for example, lose the advantage of cheap labor and begin local production in various countries like Toyota, the competition will focus on product quality with costs generally aligned. The competition will then shift to fair competition based on product quality. I believe Chinese car manufacturers should redeem their reputation through localized production rather than relying on cost advantages gaining from exploiting Chinese labor while proclaiming their strength. Have you ever considered why companies like contemporary Amperex Technology, aka Cattle, and BYD, despite their significant profits, are starting to compromise on employee benefits? For instance, Cattle's first quarter financial report this year revealed a profit increase despite a revenue decline, attributed to a significant layoff of 3,000 employees last year. Despite earning capabilities, Cattle has ascended to the top 10 global automotive parts suppliers with a profit margin surpassing Bosch, the leading German company we mentioned earlier, by more than double. Why would a highly profitable company like a Cattle implement the 8-6-9 work schedule this year, working from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, sparking significant discussion? Many of us might wonder, if a company is so profitable, why resort to imposing such a demanding schedule on its employees? Ultimately, this highlights the issue of Chinese company employees lacking sufficient bargaining power and influence. In a company, profits are usually allocated to research and development, expansion, shareholder dividends, or employee salaries. It's evident that the employees, being the most vulnerable, not only lack salary increase but also face the possibility of pay cuts and mandatory overtime at any time. If even the most profitable companies in China maintain such a labor practice, then conditions in other enterprises are likely to be even more severe. For example, as mentioned earlier, at Manor Coffee, paying an employee 5,000 yuan allows them to take on the full workload of the entire shop, inevitably leading to employee burnout. In essence, Chinese enterprises operate under a zero-sum, winner-takes-all game mentality, prioritizing dominance over cooperation and relentlessly cutting costs to seize market share. With abundant cheap labor as their primary competitive advantage, they continuously seek to lower labor costs, starting with practices like 996, moving to 896 if necessary, and even extending to 007 to maintain their edge in pricing. However, this culture of internal competition ultimately harms both individuals and enterprises. With low employee incomes, the domestic market remains underdeveloped, lacking sufficient consumer spending power. Consequently, businesses must rely on purchasing power from overseas markets. Yet, Chinese-style dumping, being inherently unfair and violating free trade agreements, often prompts other countries to reject it, citing protection of domestic industries or impose high tariffs as a deterrent. In essence, foreign market control isn't held by Chinese enterprises, making their strategy inherently risky. When a country or company focuses solely on maximizing profits through unrestricted reduction in labor costs, and the employees are left with no means to advocate for their rights, internal competition within that country reaches extreme levels. During economic downturn, society becomes a powder keg with pervasive stress and fatigue. Without a safety net of welfare systems, unemployment translates to hunger, compelling everyone to work for survival regardless of the challenges they face. It's often said that Chinese people are remarkably tolerant, seen as among the world's most compliant citizens, a fact that the Communist Party often boasts about, believing they can endure everything without resistance. I genuinely wonder where their limits lie and what levels of pressure would provoke them to rebel. There is a talk that today's post-2000 generation refuses to compromise and is quite assertive, often challenging workplace norms. Whether this is a trend or just a wishful thinking from the older 80s generation burdened with mortgages and dependence. I remain skeptical, but sincerely hope this younger generation can teach the Communist Party a lesson about not pushing people too far. Thank you for watching. Please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. Until then, be well.